Hi everyone and welcome back. In this video, I'll show you 10 art hacks suitable for any skill level. This includes a remake of my Macaron tutorial where even complete beginners can learn how to paint something like this. So keep on watching and I promise you'll learn some new drawing techniques to impress your friends or teachers. Before we jump in, I have an exciting announcement to make. This is my book which just came out and you can order it via the link below. I wrote and illustrated this before I started YouTube and it was the last major art project I did. Then I started making crafting videos and of course most of you guys know me through my DIYs. However, I was a manga artist for many years and I'm still really proud of this book. This is out of print for quite some time, but it's been republished by Search Press and I was able to visit their warehouse near London last month. It would mean so much to me if you guys get this book, maybe as a present for someone you know, because I put so much work into it back in the days. It also features a lot of my artist friends and I've linked all of their websites down below.
The first hack is extremely easy and you just need 3 highlighter pens. Draw a box that's 3 centimeters wide and any height. Add an outline if you like, or you can just do it on white. Starting with a yellow highlighter, draw 2 stripes on the left and 2 stripes on the right. Then switch to pink and create 3 stripes in a row which overlaps with the yellow. Now complete it with 3 blue stripes and you have a rainbow. This is a fun thing to do if you're just bored in class, and you can also experiment with other shapes and sizes. You don't have to worry about damaging the pens because the ink doesn't smear when you layer them together. Next, we have a quick guide to drawing equipment that can really help you work more efficiently. I use a mechanical pencil and a putty rubber for drawing manga. This type of pencil always stays sharp and it saves you so much time because you don't have to keep sharpening it yourself. In comic art, you also want to have the thinnest outlines possible, so a 0.3 or 0.5mm lead is ideal. A putty rubber is useful because it doesn't create any dust and you don't have to waste time brushing that away. Eraser dust is your enemy on many levels because it can interfere with inking or coloring down the line. The only time I use a normal eraser is for the final step of getting rid of all the pencil lines before scanning. Now, as an example, I'm going to sketch these 2 chibi characters from my book. When you're drawing, it's often hard to spot mistakes in symmetry or balance. A well-known trick is to hold your sketch up to the mirror and you'll suddenly be able to see which areas need fixing. Back when I was a manga artist, I used to work with a mirror in front of my desk all the time. However, these days, there are many more ways to check for mistakes. Everyone has a phone, so an easy way is just to take a photo of your drawing, go into editing mode and flip it. Right away, I can see that the hair isn't as round on this side and one of the eyes is slightly tilted. Another possibility is to change your phone into selfie mode and hold it in front of your sketch like a mirror. This is slightly awkward to film, but it works very well in real life. The next hack is how to improve your outlines. I recommend working with a 0.1 or 0.3mm black fineliner. 0.1 produces the best lines, but it does tend to dry out quicker than the other pens. Once I've gone over the whole sketch, I like to go back and thicken the areas that are more important. This includes the facial outlines, the hair, and any part of the body that should stand out from the background. I also like to add a thicker line around the entire outer edge. Of course, this is a stylistic choice, but I find it works well for simple designs and chibi illustrations. Here are some other examples, such as the Francis mascot that I designed for the channel Cooking with Dog. I have a lot more tips for inking techniques in my book, so please click the link below if you want to learn more. Once the sketch has been inked, it's time to color. I'm going to show you my favorite mixed media method, which uses watercolor and colored pencils. This produces a beautiful, vibrant finish that's comparable to the vividness of digital art. These are called half-pan watercolors, and I strongly recommend them if you enjoy working with traditional media. A big box like this isn't cheap, but it's an amazing investment because it lasts absolutely ages. I've had this one for almost 10 years and it's not even close to being finished. Unlike paints or markers, half pans can't dry out, so you can theoretically use these forever. To create a pale skin tone, I'm mixing yellow, red, ochre, and white together. Start with a translucent wash and try to add shading while you're working. The most typical areas for shadows on a chibi face are the nose, cheeks, brow bones, under the hair, and the ears. For darker skin tones, I'm using the same base but with more added brown. This specific color is called gold ochre, which works really well as a mid or dark value for any skin tone. Now comes the most recognizable part of any chibi character, the eyes. The first thing you want to do is add a warm gray shadow just below the upper lash line. This gives the eyeball more volume and helps the pupil stand out. If the paint starts to cover up the eyelashes, then just go over it again using a black pen. I'm going in with a light vivid green and taking care to leave a white gap near the lowest part of the pupil. Then I'm adding a darker mossy green and also stopping before I reach the bottom. The trickiest part of coloring a manga eye using traditional media is not adding too much paint. This area is usually tiny, so you have to concentrate and use each shade sparingly. For the darkest part of the eye, I'm going to use blue, which makes it look slightly iridescent. But what happens if you can only work in black and white? Traditional manga pages are monochromatic, so there are lots of ways to create beautiful eyes using ink only. This is just the method I use, and you can easily adapt it for yourself, or check out some of the other examples from my book. Let's start with a very basic sketch showing the pupil and one shine spot. First, outline the upper and lower lashes. Then go around the pupil, but leave a tiny gap where the shine spot is going to be. Use this to create a triangular, almost wedge-shaped highlight. Then add a tiny circle just below it. Fill the gaps in with black and give the pupil a very thick outline. The little circle should almost be completely sitting within this outline. Now draw an oval in the very center, which can be smaller than you'd expect. Add a ring around it like this so you have a double pupil. Use some cross-hatching to create two triangular shadow lines that converge towards the base of the eye. Be sure to leave enough white areas as well, because we need that contrast. Lastly, fill in the top part of the eye and add a bit more cross-hatching across the whole pupil to blend it in. Now you can see that once you zoom out, you have a beautifully detailed manga eye that's only created from black lines. For the next step, we're going to jump back into the mixed media technique. One of the problems I always had with traditional media is that the final result looks a bit washed out compared to digital art. It's difficult to create very bold shading with something like watercolor because you only have one attempt. If you mess it up, then your entire painting is gone. So what I always did is to use colored pencils on top. It can be any type of pencil, not just the watercolor version that I have here. A big set like this is also a good investment because it lasts forever. I've had this box for over 20 years, and some pencils have become too short to hold, but I've simply extended them with a straw. I'm going to use this to smooth over the watercolor shading and add stronger shadows. Interestingly, I find that watercolors dissolve the paper surface very slightly, and this produces a grainy texture that's perfect for colored pencils. If you've never tried this before, then you'll be amazed at how nicely the pencil color goes on. Especially for areas like the hair, it's much easier to build up bright colors using pencils. You can also get sharp, detailed shadows, which is something that's hard to do with paint if your artwork is fairly small. Now comes a hack for creating a neat finishing touch to any manga illustration. This is something that was very popular in the late 90s and early 2000s, and I'm not sure if it's still widely used today. It works particularly well for creating the illusion of glossy lips and cheeks. First, make sure that you have a strong pink or red base. Once again, I found this was a lot easier to create using pencils instead of paint. Then grab some titanium white paint directly from the tube and dot this over the cheeks. You can do this all over the drawing, creating a dreamy, sparkly effect. For best results, make sure the white overlaps on the black outlines and the dots are irregular in size. You can also create stars or sparkles inside the eye. These tiny white highlights can be used in very obvious or subtle ways. For instance, this illustration is completely digital, and I added in a very few spots to make it look extra shiny. This one was created using pen and ink. Here it's really subtle, but you can probably notice a few spots in her hair, which I added before I scanned the image. This next hack is actually a DIY which I saw on Chinese social media apps. It requires some type of cute character illustration, so I thought this was the perfect opportunity to try it out. Draw or print your chibi out onto thick paper or card. Then cut it out and use a craft knife to create a small circle for the mouth. Take a balloon and push it through so there's only a small piece showing on the other side. Now blow it up very slightly and tie the end closed. Be sure to pull the knot really tightly, because when I was making mock-ups for this DIY, I noticed that the balloon tends to deflate if you don't close it tight enough. You want to end up with something like this, where there's air on both sides. Then just squeeze the back and watch a character blow some bubbles. Last but not least is how to draw macarons. This was one of the earliest YouTube videos I ever made. Lots of people have followed this tutorial over the years and loved it, so I've always wanted to refilm this in better quality. When you think of drawing a macaron, you probably imagine something like this. It's a round oval with one line going across. The truth, however, is that when drawing macarons, you need to use 4 lines. This separates the feet from the filling. It also makes the basic shape slightly taller than you'd expect. By coincidence, I was buying Copic markers for another video and I noticed these macarons on the front. You can see the 4 lines fairly well here despite them not being outlined. The great thing about macarons is that they're really easy to sketch freehand. You just have to draw some random oval shapes and make sure they have the lines going across. Here's a quick guide on shading. If the light source is coming from the right, then you'll have the lightest area on top here. The darkest shadow runs along the side that's furthest away from the light, but it doesn't go right up to the edge. The actual edge gets lighter again because the surface is curved, so it's picking up reflected light from the other side. The macaron feet also have a sharp highlight that runs along the top and bottom. I'm going to use acrylic paint, but this tutorial works for any other media as well. I'm squeezing out a few different shades of green, some dark brown, and a lot of white. I like to start by painting the entire macaron using a single mid-value color first. This involves laying down the basic details like areas of light and shadow, plus leaving out the edges of the feet and adding some little blobs for texture. I'm using dark brown to create the shadow color, and this works for pink and yellow macarons as well. At this point, you can also start smoothing out the shading. When adding the filling, be sure to leave a tiny white gap which forms the outermost edge of the feet. Depicting contrast is what really makes macaron paintings pop out and look so satisfying. Black is very effective in creating contrast, but be sure to use it sparingly, otherwise it can easily overpower the painting. I'm just adding a tiny bit along the top edge of the feet and the shadow areas of the macaron shell. Then I'm using a tiny bit of white to create the finishing touch. Just like those white highlights from the manga illustrations, this immediately makes it look shinier and more three-dimensional. If you need to create shadow for the filling, then start by adding a dark shade along the upper edge and along the side furthest away from the light. You can also lighten the feet, which makes the contrast stronger. Then finish it with a very thin highlight in a complementary color. Some macarons are too flat to see the filling, and that's easy to paint as well. You can see how the pink one here only has one very dark shadow in between the 2 shells. The line should be slightly jagged to represent the texture of the feet. If you're painting 2 macarons overlapping each other, then don't be afraid to go in with a really dark shadow. This makes the one in the front jump out much more. So here's the finished result. These look really realistic and they're surprisingly easy to paint. Don't get discouraged if your first one doesn't look perfect. Just practice some more and you'll get the hang of it pretty quickly. One of the coolest things someone ever wrote to me once was that they painted this for art class and they got a really good grade for it.
I hope you enjoyed this video, and don't forget, all the details about my book are linked down below. I'm Joanna, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.